Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of our photography review show. I hope you all had a great week. I hope you had fun with your camera, and I also hope that you're ready for more photography fun. Anyway, if you've never been here before, my name is Jakub, and I will be your guide on today's episode of our photography review show. Now, what we do here, we basically look at your images and we look at them through three different aspects. We look at the technical part. This is where we look at the camera settings and the overall technique of capturing the image. We look at things like noise, sharpness, exposure, and so on. After that, we move on the artistic part of the image. This is where we look at things like composition, storytelling, the subject, and everything else. And finally, if we have a little bit of extra time, then I like to give you some tips and tricks on your photo editing. For that part, for the photo editing, we use a software that is called Luminar Neo. Now, if you've been following me or my company, Clever Photographer, you know that we are big friends of Luminar Neo, and this is a reason why we using it. However, most of the edits or the suggestions I give you are pretty much usable on any similar photo editing software like Lightroom, Lightroom Classic, On One, and so on. So now you know what we're going to be doing, and let's quickly cover how you can join us. It's actually really simple. All you need to do is to become our Clever Photographer Plus member. Now, to do that, you can jump to our website, cleverphotographer.com, and to make it easier, you can also add slash forward membership. There, you're going to find everything you need to know about how to join the membership. And for a little fee of $9 or $9.99 a month, you will get access to Clever Photographer Academy Facebook group, also to this photography review show. You will be able to weekly send your images and I will look at them and give you some feedbacks every week. And finally, most importantly, you will get access to our monthly digital photography bundle, which always is focusing on a certain theme. Like, for example, in January now, we were looking at fantasy photography. And what you get with this bundle is over 300 assets, including presets for Lightroom and Luminar, overlays, textures, backgrounds, custom brushes, and so much more. So that is all out of the way. We went through all the important details, and now it's almost time to look at your images. Now, as usual, January is kind of quiet when it comes to photography entries. Many people don't go out with their cameras, so we are a little bit lower on the numbers, but never mind. I have 6 photos from 3 photographers, and we will look at them in the morning. In fact, I just returned from Paris. I was there over the weekend. So a few hours ago, I have just sailed over from France to UK, and now I'm here to make sure that we don't miss the episode. I don't know how it's in your place, but it really is quite freezing now in this part of Europe. Here in UK, we are around 0 degrees. In France, it was even colder. We were most of the days around -4, -5. And that kind of weather actually gives you a great possibilities when it comes to photography. You can go out, especially for landscape, and photograph the landscape in really different temperature and different style. You know, you can focus on the flowers, having the frost, especially in the morning. That's a great opportunity for photography. Also, the street photography is really different at this time of the year, obviously with different colors, textures, and with the different light, which is often brought by that very soft, diffused, kind of white creamy sky. And yeah, so don't give up completely on photography at this time of the year. There is a lot that can be captured, and it doesn't last too long. I think in a month or two, we will be heading towards the spring. So if you can, make sure that you find a moment and head out there with your camera. And if you get a nice captures, make sure that you send them over to us. But anyway, that is all out of the way. Let's quickly open our images here in Luminar Neo so we can start. And quickly, greetings to Neil. Thank you very much for joining us live here on YouTube or on our Facebook page. It's great to have you, as well as Tony, all the way from Essex. Tony, I hope you're doing well. I've seen some of your images, so we'll get to them in a moment. And Zdeněk, hello to you too, to South Africa, where I would assume now you have a quite nice weather compared to us. So I hope that you out with your camera as much as you can. I'm really excited for Zdeněk entries this week because they are a little bit different. We're going to be looking at street photography, very much with that South African vibe. So I'm really looking forward to that. But first come first, we're going to start with landscape photography. And this week they are from David. So David, we have two images. Let me just switch to make sure that you can see the picture rather than me. And let's talk about the two images here. So one capture right here, all about the beautiful sky with the reflection in the water and the lovely golden hour colors. And then the second image, let's have a look. The second image is with this beautiful rainbow, again, over probably a same landscape, a little bit different framing, but with beautiful, beautiful rainbow, also with a little bit of reflection. So starting from here, let's start by looking at the camera details. Now, this image was captured with iPhone 14 Pro Max. Obviously, the lens that are on the phone itself is not really that important. What's more interesting is the camera settings, although they do translate a little bit differently between your usual DSLR or mirrorless and the mobile phones. But still, on the mobile phone, this was captured with ISO 40, f2.2 and 1/640th of a second. So looking at the image, obviously knowing that it was captured with the mobile phone, I think it's quite decent. First look, the sharpness is quite good. Now, once we zoom in, often when there is a bigger dynamic range or there is kind of bigger contrast between the brighter and darker areas of the image, the mobile phone will struggle even with the latest technology, but from the first look, I quite like it. Obviously, it's a beautiful scene. I really like the reflection and I like the framing. Now, technically, once you zoom in, you start to see the pixelation, and you will notice that especially the further objects away from the camera start to become quite like a cartoon. They start to be quite pixelated, and it almost looks like it's painted with watercolor. So that's obviously the limitation of the phone. However, in overall, especially when we look at the front part, you can see that the sharpness is there. It's definitely not soft because of the motion blur or anything like that. It's more the limitation of the camera itself. Now, it also gives you a little bit of noise. It's quite visible. I mean, in some parts. Now, I don't know, but often when I see these kind of patches of noise, and if I zoom in, you will be probably able to see it a little bit better. You can see there is the soft part, and then there is the part with the noise on it. And then again, when you move around, you can see that there are parts which are a little bit less noisy. And I often see this kind of effect when there was like an AI noise reduction applied to the image, because sometimes when the image doesn't have enough data, it kind of struggles and it applies the noise reduction on a certain part and it doesn't on the other. But maybe I'm wrong on this one. This is just my kind of first look at the image. So in overall, for mobile phone, I think the quality and technical part of the image is quite good, but I think more importantly, this image is all about the artistic part, about what we're looking at and what we see on the image. And that's really important to remember for us as the photographers, to really pay attention a lot to the initial and the first impression of the image, because what we do as the photographers, we look at the image and we like it, and then we go straight in looking for misperfections, looking for what was replaced where, and the noise, and those are all interesting things. However, for a normal person who is not a photographer, they obviously don't do that. They don't look for these things, they don't see them. And I think it's important to remember the part where we were just amazed by the pictures themselves. So I really like it. I think the sky is great. I think the reflection is really lovely. And so let's talk about it. So when it comes to composition, obviously reflection one of my probably most favorite composition techniques. It really helps. It adds a depth. It really makes the image super interesting. And when it's done well, I think it can work really, really well. And in this case, I think it worked well. Another thing I like is the kind of traditional use of thirds. So this is a great example of using 1, 2, and 3/3 on your image. And in this case, you would use 2/3, the upper thirds of the image for the sky, and 1/3 of the image for the land. And often this technique is used when the main subject or the main story is about the sky itself, which in this case, that's exactly it. You have the sky, which is beautiful, dramatic, really kind of fairy tale like. So you want to give it a space. That's when you place the 2/3 of your image to the sky. And then you have that 1/3 with the reflection and with the rest of the landscape. Now, obviously there are other things that help. The houses help us with the scale to understand that it's a massive lake, and all of that works really well. One downfall of the overall feeling of the image is, first, it's kind of tilted. It almost looks like it's falling down. And second one is that often when you use this really wide lens, which in this case you can see that, let's have a look if we can see what lens actually it was used. But I mean, 2.2 millimeters. Well, it is wide lens, and the effect it gives you is that the background, all the kind of part of the trees and everything is really, really small. So although the opening of the image, the sky and everything is normal, with this really, really wide lens, the that part in the middle becomes really small, and it almost disappears, and it's just very tiny. So that effect just kind of works like this on this type of landscape. Now, editing wise, I think it's quite nicely done. It's very natural, warm, pretty saturated image. I don't see anything unnatural. The white balance is nice. Obviously, again, coming back to the noise, it's there, and it's there in these kind of patches on some parts of the image more than the other. But again, in overall, I think it's nicely done. In natural, there is a little bit of a brighter area in the middle of the image, which helps to guide the viewer's eyes in. So all in all, lovely image, nicely done, well put together. And for a mobile phone, I think it's just really, really nice. So well done, David. Moving on the next image, this is where we're looking at um, the rainbow. Now, it's the same location, you can say, by the houses and also by the stones here. So let's jump straight into the technical part. This is where we're looking at, again, Apple iPhone 14 Pro Max. This time the camera settings, ISO 100, 2.2 millimeters, f2.2, and 1/100 of a second. Similarly to the first image, I think it's important to remember the first impression. When you look at it, you think, wow, it's beautiful. It looks great. Obviously, the full rainbow with the reflection in a lake, with the lovely golden colors. I think it all looks really, really nice and very interesting. I love the framing, although I would like a little bit of extra space on either of the side. But in overall, I really like that. So that's the first impression without looking in any of the details. Now, looking at the image itself and talking about the technical part, I would probably repeat myself a lot because obviously it's the same camera, it has the same technical difficulties, it has quite lots of noise, especially around the sky. This time it does even give you this kind of colorful bending around. You can see, I don't know how much you can see it on your screens, but basically it's this change of colors from one to the other, and it kind of comes in zones. And yeah, sometimes when the image is really complex, lot is happening, high dynamic range, lots of saturation, lots of contrast, these parts appear, especially when you start to push them a lot, when you start to play around with the highlights and shadows and your blacks and whites, these artifacts can happen. Again, you can probably see them quite a lot here as well. It's just part of the performance of the camera. Similarly, with the wide lens, you get the smaller part of the middle. However, it's not tilting as much, so I think that is a little bit better. Now, talking about composition, I quite like this little part of the beach here because it helps to establish a little bit of a foreground. it's just kind of building stone for the overall scene. Obviously, I love the reflection of the rainbow and the rainbow itself. Again, I really enjoy the framing with the thirds. Two-thirds of the sky, one-third of the land, which works really, really well here. I like the fact that the whole umbrella, the whole rainbow is there. I think that's really cool as well. Again, as I mentioned, I just wish that you would have a little bit more space on either of the side. Sometimes it's just for the technical part. Basically, when you want to print an image and maybe frame it, you will always have that little white frame around it, which needs to overlap a little bit the photo. And in this case, you would be really close to the main subject, which is the rainbow. So all in all, great picture. Both of them I really like. Well captured, David, especially knowing that it's done with the iPhone. I think they are beautiful. You obviously have a patience for the location and the moment. The framing is really good as well. And yeah, all very, very good. So David, thank you for sending your images over. And when you have more, make sure you send them again. Now we're gonna be moving to Tony, but before that, just quick greeting to Luis as well from Colombia. Luis, thank you very much for joining us. I hope you're doing great. Let us know in the chat how is the weather. We were at the beginning of the show, we were talking about the weather and how it is in different parts of the world. So, Luis, how is it back home now? Also, greetings to Cliff to Ontario, Canada. Cliff, I hope you're doing well. Thank you for joining us. And thank you for being with us live here on Facebook. So, moving on, it's time to look at Tony's still live captures. Tony, one more kind of texture, grungy capture right here in that kind of monotone look, and one forest capture or maybe a park with lovely drops and everything else. So let's go straight to it. Let's have a look at your images. Starting with the first one right here, let's talk about the camera details first. We are talking about Canon 100D with the 18 to 55 millimeters. Now, from the camera settings, ISO 250, 55 millimeters, f5.6, and 1/80th of a second. From the camera settings, ISO 250, so nice and low, obviously, depending on what you're trying to capture, depending on the light conditions. The idea is always to keep the ISO on a lower scale. I think in today's day and age, with the kind of recent cameras, as long as you stay under 1000, often there is a possibility to adjust the noise later on in the post-processing. But of course, the goal is to start from as low as possible. And ultimately, for example, landscape photography, the 100 would be the goal. But 250, all good. F5.6, yeah, kind of lower number on the f-stop, giving you that nice soft blur at the back and focus on the main subject. So that's all good there. 1/20th of the second, giving you decent exposure. So all good there. Nothing to worry about when it comes to the technical part. The sharpness is good. The light is interesting. So all good there. And that's about it for the technical part. Now, talking about the composition and the storytelling. Now, it's an interesting item. I would probably like to see something like this in a combination with other 2-3 images as a part of the storytelling. I always like to take these kind of images and maybe put them together in a group of 3. So you can have the kind of opener, which would open the scene with a lot happening around, as long as the subject is there. Then you can have that kind of mid-story shot, maybe with a little bit more space around the subject. And then the third image would be something like this, or a similar or different group of images together. So you could have a similar kind of lock or gate opener, and you would have 3 of them with a similar editing. I think that would work really well too. So although one of them itself doesn't really tell too much of a story, because it's just like you take like a middle part of your story and it doesn't really follow. I think maybe like making it mini-series would really help to it. So that would be my suggestion for image like this. In overall, I quite like I like the texture, I like the details, I like that kind of heavy clarity feel of it, that kind of manual technical edit. I think that looks all good. The monotone, I think, looks really nice too. It's black and white, but it's that kind of more highlighted black and white, even though there is some nice contrast. So all in all, it's a lovely idea. It's a lovely capture. Just as I say, maybe if you wouldn't want to work with such a subject further, this is where I would recommend to maybe group it in a group of three. Usually works really well because then you can really imagine of printing it and putting it on a wall or playing around with it. So this is for this image here. Nothing much I would do post processing neither. Of course, that you could push the edit, really add that kind of drama, let the texture stand out even further. But I think it's all good. Now, moving on the second capture, that kind of plant forest picture, similarly to the first one. Again, it could be part of the series, but itself, it's really, really nice. Let's talk about the technical part. Canon 1000D with the S18 to 55 millimeters. Now, from the camera settings, ISO 200, f5.6, and 1/160th of a second. So nice and low ISO again, 47 millimeters on the lens. So kind of standard value really. F5.6 again on lower side, giving us nice depth on the image, and 1/160th of a second, giving us really decent sharpness, especially at this part of the image. Technically, again, the sharpness kind of concentrated in this area. There's not really a soft blur. I think the depth works quite nicely here. The light is also really nice. There is not overall noise on it. Yeah, and the light is kind of overall diffused. So I think it works really nicely. I think it's really nice, very interesting, and technically very well captured. Now, for the composition and for the storytelling part, yeah, it's a lovely plant. I mean, I probably what really takes the image and bring it up are the drops of the water. I think that works really lovely. The depth also really help. That's a lovely technique to use for this type of photography. The darker background helps in overall to take the subject and bring it out of the scene. So lots good there. I would probably prefer to have the full part of the plant in, including this bottom part, just to kind of not cut a piece of it out. Um, yeah, it's, you know me, I'm a lot about the edges and making sure that it's all there, or zoom in even closer and to really showcase that that was the initial idea of cropping it more tighter on the scene itself. Now, maybe in overall, I would like a little bit more of the flower to be in focus, even though the depth in overall is quite nice. I think it's gonna start somewhere around here. So about half of your image is soft or out of focus. So I think that's a little bit of a shame. I would really like a little bit more of it just to be in focus. So I think it would help in overall to the image. All in all, for the post processing, not again much I would do here. I think the overall editing is really nice. It's very crisp. It's very natural. The colors are well handled. The white balance is nice. So I think it works very well and it's really nicely done. So Tony, well done. Lovely capture, lovely both captures. It's something a little bit different, and I really always enjoy seeing that. So, Tony, thank you for sending your images over, and make sure that you send us more for next week's episode. So that was Tony with his still life photos. In the meantime, we also had a hi from Ton, all the way from United States. Ton, thank you very much for watching us live here on YouTube. I hope you're having fun. And it's time to move to third photographer, which is Zdeněk, our regular participant when it comes to photography review show. For those who don't know, Zdeněk lives in South Africa, and we get a lots of entries from him. Often we get nice landscape or wildlife photography, but I think, if I remember well, this is the first time we have a few street photography captures. Now, let's jump to it. Zdeněk, starting from this image right here. So this is captured with Sony, and I never W730. I've never really seen this one. I wonder if it's maybe like a point and shoot type of camera. I will have to have a look at it later. But basically, it's a Sony camera with the camera settings ISO 80, 4.5 millimeters, f3.3 or 1/500 of a second. So that's the camera settings here. a nice and low ISO, obviously low f-stop and fast shutter speed to make sure that you freeze the overall moment. Now, looking at it, it looks all good. The sharpness is good on the foreground. Um, there is tiny bit of noise, but that's not really a big deal. Obviously, this is all about the overall scene. And yeah, so I think technically quite good. The light, it is what it is from that environment and from that scene. So I'm not too crazy about I'm not I don't worry about that. I'm more thinking about this image when it comes to storytelling and that part of the what you were trying to show us. And I think this is where the street photography coming. I really like that. It's full of colors, full of life. It's a busy street. And really the only goal here, and I think on this one, it's kind of working halfway through, is to make sure that you explain or pick one subject and try to make him stand out. In some way, when you look at the image, there is so much happening that your eyes almost don't know where to stop. There is just a lot. There are different colors, different textures, and you kind of going around, and then only you start to see different details. So I don't know exactly how to do that. You could do editing with, for example, picking up just the main subject with the colors, or you could maybe apply a little more vignette to add a little bit more brighter area if this is your main subject to that, or a little bit of dodge and burning there. Another great way of playing around with the focus is, for example, reduce the saturation a little bit on part of the image and then keep the saturation on the main subject as well. So just a way to figure out how you can take that one subject and really get it stand out from the overall scene so the viewer isn't too busy. But still, it's a great capture. Again, as I say, lots of colors, lots happening there. It really feels like almost like you're standing there. So well done on that. Now, moving to the second image. So obviously a similar feel. Now this time a little bit less busier, but still a lot happening there. So again, starting from the technical part, this was captured with Sony camera, the pocket camera, as Zdeněk mentioned in the comments. So W730 with camera settings ISO 80, f3.3, and 1/640th of a second. Now I would repeat the same, nice and low ISO, lower f-stop to make sure that we can have a nice fast shutter speed to make sure that we really freeze a moment. Now, I like both of the images. This one I like a lot as well. Shame that it's tilting a little bit, but I don't think it's a big deal for the story in overall. Obviously, with the foreground of the kind of market here, I think that's a really nice opener to the overall scene. And then we have the little tuk-tuk cars, so how you want to call them, with the people around. This is where I think this image is probably a little bit easier to consume for the viewer, because you start from the foreground, you kind of set the scene with your market and with maybe like a sweet potato or whatever is it we're looking at. And then as an addition, you have the middle ground and background where really the scenes start to get alive and it moves on. So I really like that. What I also like is that there's maybe a little bit less color, so that helps also just to keep the scene nice and organized. I think the orange here on the cars really nicely stand out from the overall picture, so that all works really well too. And in overall, I think it's great. So both of them really cool. I really like to see something a little bit different. This one, as I say, I think is maybe a little bit easier to look at to start with, but that's very subjective and personal view of the image. Anyway, from the photo editing, as I say, I would just maybe try to straighten it a little bit. Now I know that this side looks straight. This like is tilting a little bit, which is maybe more caused by the camera itself and by kind of wider lens. So let's have a look if we can maybe just tilt it around just a bit, maybe just somewhere around here, just to kind of balance it in overall. Yeah. And but that's probably just about it. If anything, if we would really want to edit it a little bit to add more attention towards the center of the image, we could basically apply little darker gradient to the bottom of the image to do something like this. And that way, we start we start a little bit from the darker part. So we just darken the bit at the bottom and then add more attention towards the center. This can also be done with a little bit of dodge and burning. So just a little bit of extra exposure with a bigger brush. And we could just paint over these parts just to make them a little bit brighter. Now, the thing is, if you're going to show it to somebody, he will not notice. It's really not that noticeable. But at the back of their mind, the eye and everything will know that the darker part will kind of enter and open the image, and then the brighter part will be the main subject of it. So nothing huge, just a few kind of things maybe to look at, but in overall, great captures. Really enjoyed it as well. I think it's really something different, and it's great to see Zdeněk. So if you're going to take out your camera again to a similar environment, make sure that you share the images with us. So that's that, guys. Thank you very much for sending your images over. It was great to look at them and great to see them. Zdeněk, I hope that your weather improves in South Africa. I hope that you get less rain. Tony, thank you very much for sending your still life over. It was great to see it. And David as well, stunning captures with your mobile phone camera. Well done for that. Folks, I will be back again next Tuesday, 6 p.m. UK time here on YouTube or our Facebook group and page. I already can't wait to see your captures. If you're looking for the links where you can upload them, you know that they are already available on our Clever Photographer Academy, as well as in the membership itself. So, folks, have a lovely evening. Thank you very much for joining me today. Thank you if you're watching this in replay. And I can't wait to see you again in a week's time live here on Clever Photographer channels.